Everybody has a T-chart sticking out in front of them, and you just keep a pencil. And every time you see that, you go, wow, point for you, point for you, point for you.
Welcome to the Misfit Behaviorists podcast. Join your hosts, Audra Jensen and Caitlin Beltran, here to bring you evidence-based strategies with a student-centered focus. Let's get started.
We would like to take today to talk about running social skills groups. It's been a request in the group, as well as just it's such an important topic because it's a little tricky, especially if you're working in schools. And how do we run groups? What's the purpose? How do you run them? Who do you put in them? How does it go? What's been your experience, Caitlin, over the years in running social skills groups?
I used to hate group instruction, and I feel like when I first started, I was much more adept and fluent with working with one learner, maybe two at a time. I feel like working in the public school system as opposed to private and the clinic world has taught me a lot. And I don't know that I'm the best at running groups, but I've seen them done in so many phenomenal ways. So I really see the value and can appreciate a really well run group when I see one.
Yeah, they're really fun. I've been in clinical and school for many years. And so I've run groups, everything from your smallest little dyad group into your adults going on community outings and talking about relationships and stuff. So I've seen the gamut of what a social group is and how it benefits and where it works and doesn't work. And I think the biggest thing, the big takeaway I want to talk about is the kind of the purpose of a social group and who to put in it. Because I think a lot of people, I saw this more in the clinical setting, want to jam kids into groups because a group is lovely, because you want to be around peers and stuff. But some kids are not ready to be in a group setting. They're not ready for that type of learning. So really analyzing who you want to do a group. And I don't know if you follow Michelle Garcia Winter in social thinking, but I learned a lot from her mentorship program that there's social behaviors, the first set of things where you have your most supported learners who's just learning to follow certain rules of social guidelines, the rules of sitting in a group or walking in a line, or just basic behaviors that we need to teach. And we do a lot of reinforcement to reinforce those behaviors. So social behaviors. And then you have the next level, which is social skills. So those who are just emerging with some of the social overtures and they're starting to be aware of peers and stuff like that. I'm going to talk about that group in a minute. And then there's more like the social thinking, the social learning, social cognition, those who are really capable of understanding that their behavior has an effect on other people's thoughts and feelings, and other people's behavior has an effect on their thoughts and feelings, and kind of this symbiotic relationship that we have. So that's a different type of learner that we put in group. And so there's different things that you would do at those three different levels. Your social behavior kids, your very early learners, I wouldn't put into a group at all. We're just basically learning the facets of living in an environment. There's so many basic skills that we have to teach that I wouldn't put them in a group setting. First of all, they're not going to learn from their peers anyway, just because observational learning is not really kicked in yet. We're really working as a teacher, learner, and practicing skills. And then that middle group is they're just starting to emerge in that. You want to capitalize on that, but you don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of other peers and stuff going on. So you want to keep it very structured and very small. And then your social thinking, social cognition kids are those that you can really do more typically developing. And these are where I would pull peers, typically developing peers in so they can learn from those. So there's those three different sets of kids that I think about.
It's such a great overview, like a hierarchy of the group models. And then hopefully we can touch on too, working in that clinic versus school setting, because I know, just like you're saying, sometimes the child might not be ready for the group. If you're sometimes in a public school, like the group is there and we have to find a way to fit either the child into the group or work on those prerequisite skills, all the skills you mentioned, like waiting and turn taking. So even if they're not in a group, I'm always training teachers to think about if they're not ready for a group, we have to be seeing you teaching some of those skills to get them ready for that group.
Exactly. So I kind of wanted to talk about kind of the three group models that I've used over time, and then a deeper dive into an example of a group in that middle most of the kids would go into, and then how to know if your kids are ready and how to do that, and the role of the different things that we do in a group. The three group models that I think about is the first one is what I call the dyad group, which isn't really a group. It's just basically two kids. I'm not going to talk about those just social behavior kids because I'm not going to put them in a group, even at a dyad. They're just not ready for that. The dyad is the very early middle group, those that are just starting to show attention to their peers and awareness. They're able to learn in a setting with a little bit more distraction. So I usually would just have two early social learners in this group, plus the facilitator or teacher. And these are kids who usually have some language, they have some social awareness, they're showing some interest in their peers, or maybe they're interested in their peers, but it's negative interest. So anytime a peer is near their puzzle, they're freaking out or something. They're not able to have a peer around them.
Mhm.
That's a really good time to have that practice group. And
Yeah.
those are kids who are working past that social behavior into focusing on what can we do next.
I love the idea of that early group introduction with a pair. And then sometimes we look at the kids we have, like you were mentioning in the beginning, and thoughtfully choose, I think this kid will work well with this kid. And of course, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you have to put this kid with this kid based on the day. But trying to be thoughtful about that if you can, like maybe this kid is really good at waiting and this student can learn from watching and they have some of that observational learning, or they can do some of their tasks together. So looking at their skills and their skill set is a really good thing to start with as well.
That's a really good point in thinking about who you're putting with. So either somebody who is the exact opposite, somebody who has the
Mhm.
skills, and then you're working on the skills, or have two working on the same skill, and you as the facilitator is really the peer in that setting. And so you're the one, the example that they're building off of. If you have two kids who are working on the same skill, just make sure that you are presenting yourself as that practice, that example, and that your games and stuff incorporate all three of you. When you have a dyad, we have a typically developing peer and a peer who's working on skills, then you can facilitate it more as like working the two together. So there's the two different ways that you can run that group. And in that group, you're going to work on really simple goals like sharing materials, greetings, turn taking, very simple, concrete things that you can set up. And you're going to use lots of language. Look how they feel. And what a great choice to share with your friend. And what could we do next? You're just beginning to bridge that gap outside of themselves and into what is it peer thinking and doing and how can that affect me? And then physical activities are really good in a dyad. These are the kids who are really responsive to swinging and running around and doing physical things and against the
I
body
know.
moving, but it triggers the brain in some ways. And they get really excited and they're more aware of their surroundings, including their peers when they're doing the physical activities. And then the other kind of activities I like to do at the dyads is very simple put in activities and games where there's a
Mhm.
simple turn taking. There's like Pop the Pig and the Icebreaker
Mhm.
game. And those type of games are really good for this. There's some really fun ones like the tossing of the rings onto the clown's hat was one. There was one with scarves. Was a
Oh,
really
okay.
fun one.
So for the most basic low cost that everyone has in their classroom, we just use a deck of Uno cards and we take out any reverse wild +4. So it's just color matching and we put like red, green, yellow, blue in the middle. So that it's not so much as a winner or loser because a lot of times they're not understanding that concept anyway, but it's just
Exactly.
your turn, my turn, and it's just matching. And sometimes they do get like a little bit of competition within it, which is nice, but it's like such a simple game. You can even just do 5 or 10 cards at a time. It's like a nice intro that we use for almost all of our kids who just start turn taking.
I love that. There's another one, and I just have it's like in my other room, but there's a bag and they're little squares, they're black squares that have different colored shapes on them. I can't remember the name of it, but you play it like a dominoes thing, but we never went into the real. It's basically a simple matching game. So you each have a set of these
Mm.
little blocks and you take turns matching either the color, the shape. Those kind of really simple games that are just a basic turn taking are perfect for this group.
This is making me think I'm going to start a thread in our Facebook group. Like, what early games do you play in your dyad pairs or small groups? But I love this conversation because I feel like when I first was trained in working in a small group or a dyad like a million years ago, I feel as a field, we were still more on the wave of getting as many data points as we can and like fast paced instruction, sometimes at the cost of that social emotional piece. So I feel like thankfully we've evolved and grown to where I would really never run a diet the way I did when I first started, because now we see the value in more of the peer interaction and less of the one to one drill, fast paced instruction. So I might sacrifice like 4 or 5 trials per student per goal for that one opportunity for them to come together. Maybe I am working on something with one student and the other student can't participate in, but I can say, hey, can you help me set out the cards? And then can you wait for 10 seconds? And then can you pass your cards to him and he'll clean up and then you pass them back to her, or find other ways for them to interact where it's going beyond just that like strict number readiness or something.
Yeah, those are really good. We used to get those big chunky puzzles are really good because they're easy to do and they're easy to hold. But we'd give them each one and then put all of the puzzle pieces into one set and then divide them out. So they would each have some of each other's as well as their own. And so as they put them together, and they were puzzles they liked and they knew that they could do, as they put one in, they'd find one for their friend. And so they'd either have to hand it over
Oh, I
or to
love
ask
that.
that one, but we'd make sure that they had some of each, both their owns and the other one, just crossing boundaries. And then there's other ones like sharing materials, having a group craft project, but all of the materials are divided out. And so you all need circles or whatever it is, but only one person holds the circle. So you have to ask your friend for the circles. So the whole idea in this group is to cross boundaries, to share materials, to turn taking, very simple things. And in this group, I'd really keep the sessions really short. I'm talking 15 minutes. Of course, it depends on your learner, but most of the time their attention spans aren't ready to do a full 45-minute group. So keep 10 to 15, 20 minutes max for this group. And I like to keep it very structured. So the whole set of the time is always the same. We may not do the same activities every time, but we always come in. We have a certain kind of grading. We have a certain kind of prep. We have a cleanup time. We do the activity. We clean up, then we leave. And it's always the exact same. So they have that predictability. So then the second type of learner is that intermediate social learner. And this is where the bulk of our students that we have in groups are, at least that I've seen over the years. It can range from those who are just past that dyad group to ready to really do that social cognition stuff. But these are most of the kids. And I think of 6 to 10-year-olds, there are 3 to 4 kids in a group. They have basic social skills. They have some social language. They're not just rote speakers anymore. They have some social language. They may need to work on understanding kind of the impact of their behavior on other people's thoughts and feelings. These may be kids who have some gen ed time or fully gen ed, but they can really exist in a group. I still would keep that number of the group down to 3 or 4 because you don't want to get too many of this group. It just becomes mad chaos. We've tried that before. Keep it short.
100%. Sometimes we had groups with 5. And I think too, one thing I would say is one of the common mistakes I see, myself included, when I first started was in thinking that we've talked a lot about putting a lot of thought into pairing of the group and the makeup of the children involved, but not to be discouraged if you feel like they're all working on skills that are at very different levels. And I think you can go too far down that rabbit hole where it's like, I can't put these 3 and I can't put these 3 and I can't put these 3. That doesn't mean because they're working on different skills, none of them can sit together. Like you said before, opposites sometimes are great pairing, as long as you're being thoughtful about it. Because I've worked with teachers in the past who are like, can't run groups this year. I can't run groups with them. Can't run groups with them. And it's there's a lot to learn from each other. Yeah. Or we can start getting creative with that.
And even if you're having free time together and you're all working on different skills, but you're sharing space together, there's so much social cognition that you have in just sharing space with somebody. Maybe your group is just 15 minutes of free time. You guys are sharing space together and learning how to navigate basic plays that we don't play enough anymore.
Oh my gosh. I love that you said that. And going back to, I love the puzzle example you did where they're doing it together. The one teacher that I work with who runs a phenomenal group and she differentiates for all of their goals. But what she also started doing was a more like chill, fun group where it's just 10 minutes of like free play. And she started it not because she just wanted to kick back, but because the kids were having such a hard time with shared materials. So she puts all the Play-Doh out, all the cutting tools, all the like accessories. You always have those 1 or 2 kids that are like hoarding all the materials the second you sit down. So she was like, wow, I need to work on this more so that they learn this is not just mine. Like we're all just sharing and putting back and sharing and putting back. And it really worked wonders.
You had a guest come on. I can't remember if it was Michelle or somebody.
That's who it was. It was Michelle.
Yeah. So she does the clubs after school. And we've had that in one of our other schools. What a great opportunity to get some of your kids in there and not have any set plan, but just to be there sharing space with peers and learning how to navigate the normal stuff that comes up in play. We had a Lego club at the elementary I was working at. It was fantastic. It was for everybody. Anybody could go.
Yeah.
And you can group them all together if you need to. There was the Pokemon cards club.
Ooh.
Chess club, of course, all of those things. Those are social groups. They're just naturalistic. So in this kind of intermediate group, you're going to talk about flexible thinking, so much flexible thinking, sportsmanship, being a good loser, a good winner. It's like social thinking, cooperative play, being part of a group, planning as a group. Those are your basic goals that you're working on. You're going to look at the kids that you have in the group and come up with the goals that you want. If you're not doing the naturalistic one, to have a kind of structured plan, I just found it was better. If we had a planned group that we'd come in, we'd do the same activity or the same structure every time that we met together. And they like that, especially if you're working with kids on the spectrum. They like the predictability of having kind of a schedule and knowing what to expect. So When we come in, we have 15 minutes of just open play. Then we clean up because that is part of the play is cleanup time. And then we're going to talk about the activity we're going to do. And then we're going to do the activity. And then again, we're going to clean up because that's part of the plan. We're going to think about what we're doing with our friends. And then we're going to wrap up and talk about it. And then so it's always exactly the same. And we'd have certain kind of fun activities that we would do every week that would excite them. And they plan for that.
I think that's a great point. And another common mishap I see sometimes where in thinking that the group is just going to run itself, like I'm going to read a story and ask questions and what could go wrong. But like all the prep that goes into that, again, are you remembering, differentiating? Do you have a list of each child's kind of goals or prerequisite skills? Have you trained your parents if they're shadowing behind so that one's not sitting over here and one's not hovering on top? Someone's ready to prompt. Are there augmentative devices ready and close by so we don't have to grab materials as we're going? Just all the prep work. And like you said, if you're running it the same every day, even if the activity changes, it really becomes like a well-oiled machine. And if little things do go wrong, because of course they're going to, I do like that it teaches the flexibility with the kids and us. So like sometimes something gets knocked off the table and they can't pass the material, but they have to learn to say, oops, I'll get it or something like that.
Then the third group would be those advanced social learners. And these are usually your older or very socially adept kids. And you can have maybe a couple more, maybe 2 to 6 kids into a group like this. I found most of the groups that I was running like this was just in the clinical model, just because we were able to do more of the outings and stuff like that, community outings. These are kids who usually in a school setting, you can do this too, but kids who are working on friendships and deeper friendships, relationships you might be dealing with, interact independently. They may need help with kind of the subtle and nuances of social interactions. And we do in these groups a lot of role play and thinking about the impact of their behavior on other people, really trying to get them to think about how other people are thinking about them. So this is where we're talking about dating, getting a job, hygiene issues and stuff like that. Hygiene is a huge thing. I don't know how much you worked with teenage and young adults on the spectrum, but they just do not understand the importance of getting their hair cut, using deodorant. So little things like, they're not little, but I think that's kind of part of it is realizing the things that we think are little are really, and what are the hurdles, the barriers to them. First, understanding what the social expectations are and why it's important to them. And I think that's a really deep conversation. So these are kids who are more advanced. You're able to do a lot more just sitting around and talking. So we used to have like teenage group in the clinic. We'd have like teenage room where it looked like a teenage bedroom. It was decorated like teenage stuff. It had Xbox and all this stuff. And we were able to just come in and sit around and chat about things. And so you may not see that as much in a public school, but it's really important if you're working with kids that you understand that is where they're going. And so some of the things you're working on with these older, more adept kids is you're doing more project-based stuff. You're doing role plays. You're focusing on empathy and problem solving. The social risks of giving compliments or asking somebody out on a date is risk-taking stuff involved and how to handle that rejection when it comes, because it does come for everybody. So those are all really good things to focus on in this group. And again, with this one, you're not going to have as structured of a plan. It's a lot of them driving what's important to them. It's a lot more of what do you want to work on? What's important to you? I have a lot of young adults that want to get a job. And so they think they should just be able to walk in and get a job. But there's all the interview process and how you look, how you present yourself, who you talk to, how do you present a resume? There's all these little pieces that become a great project. Or dating is a huge one, wanting to have a relationship but not understanding how to get there. I have somebody very important in my life who would just like a person to drop out of the sky and doesn't realize that there are a lot of things that go into finding a person. The whole point of all of these is become socially aware, but to gain independence away from facilitators and teachers and parents. The whole point is we want all these kids to grow up and be independent and happy and living in the social world and being successful in whatever success means to them. So my big question for you, Caitlin, is you're a data guru. What's the best way that you've seen in taking data when needed in some of your group settings?
I do have, and I'll share it in the Facebook group for sure, just like a very basic 1-page group data sheet. I think it has enough for maybe up to 5 students, and you could list like 1 to 3 goals per student. And so when you first look, it's almost like a table, like students on one side, goals on the other. And then you're not necessarily hitting every goal with every student the whole time or every time, every group. But that way, if you're running groups every day for a week, you can use the same data sheet and just like cross check, circle the plus or minus, and move on. And you can use it on a clipboard or a binder so that any para or teacher can grab it. So anything like that I can make as easy as possible for staff. I love to use that.
I'm glad you're going to share that. We did an NAT episode last year, I think, naturalistic environment. I think we did a data sheet. I put using that.
Yes.
And a naturalistic environment data sheet is really good for a group setting because it is more natural. And we absolutely recognize how hard it is to take data when you're trying to navigate to our students as well. It's almost impossible. So unless you have a para or somebody that's able to take data in the moment, it's really hard to take accurate data after a moment. And so finding to get creative, a teacher game is my favorite one to use in groups. And I just created a product that I'll link that to. But Beat the Teacher games can be as simple as just using a Post-it note and a T-chart. And so on one side it says me, the other side says teacher. And you go through beforehand what the expectations are. Hey, this week we're going to work on being a really good listener to our peers when they're talking. So that's the goal we're going to work on. Everybody has a T-chart, sticky note in front of them, and you just keep a pencil. And every time you see that, you go, wow, point for you, point for you, point for you. And if you have to give reminders or they're off task or whatever it is, then the point goes to the teacher on that side. And the whole point of Beat the Teacher is just to beat the teacher. So at the very end, they can either be individual, hey, I beat the teacher, I beat the teacher. Yay. You want to be really lavish with their points and very reserved with your. So it's almost always that they beat the teacher. Or you can put all their points together, all the teacher points together and see collectively as a group. And then you're always working for something. The last 5 minutes of free play, we're either going to get to the Pokemon cards or we're just do puzzles. You're going to choose which one depending on who wins. So Beat the Teacher is a really easy one to use. And it was probably my favorite. And it's not necessarily data taking unless you're really concrete about how you're taking it, but it's motivating them to have one goal in mind that they're really working for, or you can do multiples at once. That's a really easy one to use.
I love that. And it like highlights and forces all the staff to remember to call out all those positive behaviors you're seeing too.
So just to wrap up, a couple of quick tips and best practices for running social groups. Set those clear but flexible structures. So always have a plan, but be prepared to throw the plan out the window because things change or somebody comes in sick and miserable or somebody comes in a bad mood. Be prepared to be flexible yourself as you're teaching them. And I think would add to that to always narrate your own feelings and your own flexibility. So if something happens and the game that you wanted to play isn't accessible or something that day, be really clear about how you're being flexible about changes and stuff like that. Flexibility is such a huge thing with the kids that we're working with. So be flexible about, wow, this is really frustrating. I wanted to play this game. I'm going to be flexible. And then, so using the same language for yourself. Same thing with working as a group plan. So what was the group plan? We were going to do this, but I don't want to do that. But I'm going to be part of the group here and I'm going to think as a group. And so using the language about yourself, I think is really important when you're dealing with that. Use visuals and timers. Those are really helpful for preparing for change and transitions. Role play is a great way to do a lot of activities. We talked briefly about taking data, but be mindful that the data you take and the goals that you have need to be simple enough that you can take it. And I think our next episode, Caitlin's going to be talking about data collection mistakes and stuff. And this is one thing, it's just don't overextend yourself in taking data or planning to take data. Don't get down on yourself if you weren't able to take data in a certain situation. Be flexible about that. I would say in a group setting to really be as small as possible with the goals that you take, just so you can be successful yourself.
Yeah, just prioritize. Maybe you're hitting 1 to 2 targets per learner per group, and that's totally sufficient.
And celebrate those small wins, the social wins, the safe risk taking, the things that they're doing, because if they're coming out from the social behavior, the early social learning stuff, and starting to interact with peers, there's going to be a lot of negative situations that they are going to start feeling bad about. They want to be reinforced positively for social overtures as well. Is a lot of risk taking in social groups and social interactions. And so make sure you're celebrating those wins for them. And the last thing is to really communicate with your families, keep that consistency up, make sure they know what you're doing in group and what they can work on at home. I think that's a really helpful thing to do. Wrapping up, hey, just try maybe one new dyad this week or one new intermediate group. Try to put some kids together, see how it goes. Take your own risk taking, see what you can do. Try to take some data you hadn't done before in a social group. So those are the things that we want you to try this week. Go to the Facebook group, join us.
Grab that free data sheet. And then I'm also going to start a thread for like easy, low prep dyad or group games that you guys have going on.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. And we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Misfit Behaviorists. And be sure to tune in next week for more tips and tricks. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.